All right, so the very first part of the presentation is actually going to be a 5-minute video clip. There is a point to this. We're going to come back to it at the end of the presentation. But just for right now, just watch this imaginary SNL classroom and just think about classroom management. Just think about the classroom. Look at the teacher, look at the students, see their interactions, see how they do. Okay, so it's queued up.
This is not funny. It's not the system.
Might have a few issues while it thinks.
Alright, settle down, settle down. I've graded your test, and I have to say, I am more than a little bit disappointed. In fact, I've decided I'm gonna throw them all out.
Alright! Oh, man.
I think I've been placing too much emphasis on details. What I want to do now is I want you to forget about memorizing dates. I want you to think history, okay? We're just going to make each other think, okay? Now, is everybody with me on this? All right, good. Let's talk about the Battle of Britain and the Lend-Lease Act. How are these two events linked in history? Anybody got any thoughts? Sabrina?
So, the test that you threw out, that's not going to count?
No. Everybody got that? Okay, now back to the Battle of Britain and the Lend-Lease Act. Roosevelt said that America must be the great arsenal of democracy. Now, what did he mean by that? We must be the great arsenal. What does he mean? Randy?
That we had to be, this big arsenal.
Arsenal, with an L.
Oh, right. That we needed to be, I'm not sure I understand what you're asking.
Okay, maybe that wasn't a fair question. All right. Now, what country did Roosevelt want to supply with weapons? Who can tell me? What country? Remember, we're talking about the Battle of what? Who can tell me? Lisa?
Britain?
Yes, good. You see, now we're thinking history.
Mr. Thompson, I was about to say Britain.
That's good. So Roosevelt wants to help Britain in the war against who? Who is Britain at war with? Who can tell me? Okay, let's think now. What was happening in Europe in the 1930s? Darlene?
I thought you said that we weren't going to have to know dates.
You're right. Let me put it another way. In the decade before World War II, what was happening in Europe?
France.
Yeah, France. But let's think, what political group was in Europe at the time?
The French?
Yes.
Mr. Thompson, the French are still in Europe today.
Hey, let's just get off the French for a while, okay?
Okay, sure.
No, I'm sorry, I was just, Larry, making a point. There are French people in Europe, like Larry said, even today. You don't have to write that down. It's not going to be on a test. All right, let's think about some of the other countries in Europe. Now, name some of the other countries in Europe besides France. Let's look at the map up here. Okay, now where's Europe on the map? Anyone? Where's Europe? Is this Europe? Here? How many of you think this is Europe? Right there. Show of hands. Think this is Europe? You're right, that is Europe. All right, good. Now, what are some of the countries in Europe?
Spain?
Uh-huh. Good. Anybody else?
France?
Yes. Can someone name another?
Germany.
Yes, Germany. Yes, very good. Let's talk about Germany.
Sweden?
Right, but let's stick with Germany for a second. Yeah, let's just go back to Germany, all right? Now, what political group was in power in Germany at this time? Somebody want to take this one? Larry? Randy? Who haven't we heard from? How many of you saw Raiders of the Lost Ark?
I have it on tape. I can read it.
No. Now, in the movie was Indiana Jones fighting besides the snakes? He was fighting the Nazis. Okay. So what did the Nazis do? Let's think.
Oh, they tried to steal that lost ark and then their faces melted at the end.
They put up the Berlin Wall?
Oh, that's right.
No, they didn't put up the Berlin Wall.
Yeah, they did.
No, they didn't.
Are you sure? Because I think that they did.
You're thinking of the communists. That was 1961.
Mr. Thompson, I thought that you said that we weren't going to have to know dates.
I'm sorry. I forgot. All right. Now, the Nazis were in power in Germany. So who was England at war with during the Battle of Britain? And don't say France. Who can tell me? Not France, but... Take a guess.
Germany?
Yes.
Germany? Because I was able to say Germany?
Yes.
I got a question. Who came up with that name? Europe.
You know, I think we've done enough today. Let's just, let's read quietly. For the rest of the period, just everybody, read at your desk. Everybody,
Mr.
just read it. Yeah,
We never did get to find out what that guy Roosevelt meant by the great Arsenio.
it doesn't matter. In fact, why don't you bring in your copy of Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Alright, so that was my introductory video. Oh my goodness, go away. So, like I said, we'll be returning back to that at the end of the presentation. Hopefully you noticed some of the interactions between Seinfeld, the teacher, and the students, because that's actually what we're going to be covering, is classroom management today, as you two are perfectly well aware of. So, getting this actually to go on, sorry, my computer can sometimes be a bit finicky. Alright, so we're going to create a better environment for every student. That includes your students, especially I guess in your line, it would be in Sunday school or in another, capacity, because you guys aren't necessarily teachers, but you could be one day. So what is classroom management, and how can it be utilized in the classroom to create a positive classroom environment? We're going to learn about 3 different areas within classroom management. We're going to look at behavior management, so how can we handle student behaviors? How can we have some classroom management in place so that we can cut behaviors off at the beginning so they don't even happen? And what do we do during behaviors? And even what do we do after? What do we do then? Seating arrangements. As you can see, my classroom already has its own seating arrangement, but is this seating arrangement good for what I'm looking for? Well, we'll find out. Is it good for what you're looking for? We'll find out. And student-centered classroom management. And this will actually be a discussion portion where we're just going to be talking and just throwing off ideas at one another. And just trying to see how much power should we give students in classroom management and how much should be the teacher's, role. How much should the teacher actually have? All right, so classroom management, well, what is it? Classroom management is building stronger relationships with your students. This is actually an absolute must. This is the #1 that I saw in multiple sources when researching online, is that if you build a positive relationship with your students, there's really nothing that can go wrong, because the students trust you, you trust the students, you both build up a respect for each other, you know each other, and so the students are less likely to do anything that they consider, wrong, because they know that you know them and they know you. Promoting a love for learning and success, something that in the video it did not show. There obviously was no love for learning because they had no clue what was going on. They just thought it was France the entire time. Number 3, well-balanced routines. So procedures, response to behavior, and it has to be planned. When you're doing things like well-practiced routines, kids need to know that yes, they're planned, you have them in place, and that it's consistent. That every day it's going to be the same thing. For me personally, one of the things that I have set up over here on my FYI board, every morning that the students come in, they take their name from the side over here, they make their lunch choice. and they go and sit down and they get started on homework, they do their writing journal, they might have something to do in the back of the computers, but they know every day that's the routine. That nothing should change from that. So it makes it very easy for them. So there's really little room for frustration. So misbehavior is very slight in this case. Number 4, stating expectations and rules that are challenging but realistic and achievable. And this is something that some teachers have a tough time with. Because we want our students to excel, to, really, we want 5th graders to be able to perform like a 7th grader. Because, they can do it. There's really no reason they can't. But they are children. You have to still keep that in mind. So you have to push them, but you can't push them to the point where they just shut down. And they want to throw things or poke their neighbor because they're just tired. They're like, I can't do this anymore. Or they even frustrate themselves and they just say, I can't do it. I give up. No confidence in myself anymore. So just making sure they're really realistic and achievable. High, but reachable. Number 5, offering proper interventions when students need help. If a child is struggling, making sure that you do help that child. Maybe pull them aside, one-on-one. Maybe have a discussion with them. Maybe get them a tutor from inside the class so the tutor can benefit and then the student who's struggling can benefit. This will also help. Again, trying to limit frustration. The more frustration a student experiences, the more misbehavior you're going to have in the classroom. And the least effective your classroom management is going to be. Number 6, learning about your students to engage them in your lessons. This kind of relates back to number 1, but it sort of mentions the fact that learning about your students will help engage them. If they know you and your personality, it's going to make it more fun to actually listen to you. Because they're not going to be like, oh gosh, it's the teacher again, talking again. Instead it's going to be like, oh, that's my buddy. Not really like friend, but you know what I mean. They'll know you and you'll know them. So now, looking at what classroom management is, it's also important to see what classroom management is not. And many teachers, and I can say I myself have also fallen into these things that you shouldn't do for classroom management because it's very easy to. So it's good to recognize what not to do. Number 1, telling students what to do to make your life easier. Classroom management is not this. Classroom management, like I said before, it's planned. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort, and you have to constantly correct students who don't do what they're supposed to do. It's not about making your life easier. It's mostly about making their life easier so that they can learn and they can be engaged. It's not about you. And that's one of the things that's tough. It's hard not to put yourself into the classroom management. But you have to detach yourself personally. It's not about you. Creating an unengaging environment to pacify students. So classroom management is not sitting your kids down and saying, here's a worksheet, here's a pile of worksheets, have fun, I'm going to sleep in the back. That's not classroom management. And in fact, that's probably going to make your classroom chaotic. Because kids are going to be so bored, they're going to be like, oh my gosh, get me out of here, and they're just going to want to do anything and everything to try to break that boredom. It's not good. Number 3, teaching lessons the way you want to teach them because it's easier for you. As you may or may not know, students come into your classroom, they have all different types of learning styles. Tons of different learning styles. They have visual, they have to have hands-on things. Some kids, they have to get up and move around to learn. Everything is different. And everyone is different. So teaching a lesson the way that you want to teach it to make it easier for you is not a way to engage students. It's just not. Because, one of the ways I like teaching is kinesthetically, getting kids up and active and moving around. But not every kid learns that way. And if I only ever taught it that one way, I'm going to lose half my class. They're not going to care anymore. They're going to be much happier when they go to Dave next door than when they're over here. And then you want to get all the kids together and have them all working and have them all engaged. So, it's not about making life easier, as it says up here. Number 4, use for the teacher's best interests. Again, it's kind of cycling back to what it says about, not to pacify students, not to make your life easier. It's not about us, it's about them. That's what classroom management is it's majority about. It's only probably 5% the teacher. Number 5, inconsistent disciplines or ignoring problems in the classroom. And this is something that I have done in the past when I was less experienced. And, you do it from time to time, it just happens. But this is what classroom management is not, is inconsistent disciplines. If Fancy here calls out in the middle of class, and I do absolutely nothing, and I think it's fine, and then Morgan calls out, but I punish Morgan, it's inconsistent. And it shows the kids that even I don't know what I'm talking about. I have no classroom management, and it's going to frustrate them and cause misbehaviors because they don't know what to do to actually please me. All they know is that, well, she yelled at Morgan, but she didn't yell at Fancy. Now what do I do?
Also,
So-
suggesting favoritism would make it seem like you're hurting your relationship with the children.
Yes, actually, I think that is one of them. Is it the next one? Oh, it is favoritism. You didn't even look in your packet. That's awesome. Yes, it also shows favoritism. That I'm favoring Fancy over Morgan because I didn't discipline Fancy, but I disciplined you. So it's making sure that it's just consistent. It's consistent all around the board, and also not ignoring problems. If obviously every time I turn my back, Fancy says something mean to Morgan and she's starting to cry, I shouldn't turn around and say, well, I didn't say it. So I guess it's just going to have to happen. So I can't just ignore a problem that arises. And even if a kid is like, pulling someone's hair next to you, I shouldn't just ignore that. Because it's not going to do anything. It's actually going to create a worse environment for that student and for the student that they're pulling the hair on. And yes, and no favoritism. Classroom management is not about favoritism. It's not about, I like Roger over there, but Sally, ugh. Gosh, I don't like Sally. Sally wears terrible dresses. So it's not about that. It's not about that at all. It's also, classroom management is not unplanned. Like I said before, it has to be planned if it's going to be effective. It has to be. There's no way you can wing it. There's no way classroom management can be winged. I did try that my first year. Cannot be done. I tried it and it did not work. Classroom management may be hard for teachers because classroom management isn't something we're born with. We don't grow up and think to ourselves, I know how to manage children. I can do anything. We don't have that power within us at the very beginning. We need to be trained in classroom management, and we kind of have to learn by trial and error, the things that work and the things that don't work. And actually, for classrooms, that could be every single year that you're trial and erroring, because every class is different, every student is different. Just because one year, a reward system worked doesn't mean that the next year it will. So you have to always be constantly changing and having that trial and error to get what you want, because everything is different. Remember, there we go, every class and every student is different. I'm kind of ahead of myself there. And one method won't fit the bill. It just won't. There's absolutely no way that you can just be like, well, if I just yell, if I yell at everybody, everything will be fine. There's just absolutely no way that it's going to fit the bill. Actually, yelling is not one of the management skills I would choose. But I'm just saying that one is not going to fit the bill. Or sending all the kids to the corner, because then you're going to have like a huge pile. It's going to be one huge group. The most important classroom management piece is to establish from day one. So we talked about what classroom management is and what it is not. But these are the ones you should absolutely establish the first day that you have students. The very first day. It's routines and procedures. The benefits, students don't have to guess what's expected that day. Like I was mentioning over here with my morning routine. The kids make their lunch choice, they sit down, they get to work. They don't have to guess what will please me that day. It's not like I'm saying, no, today I don't want you to use clothespins. Today I want you to come in the back and mark something on a board. They're going to be like, what? That makes some sense. So it is good to have that so they're not guessing, because that'll also make kids get frustrated. Students have a lower chance of getting frustrated, causing them to misbehave. Establishing positive expectations and rules. This is another thing that you should establish from day one. So not only with routines, but also positive expectations and rules. The benefits, establish expectations allow the students to perform in a particular way, allowing the teacher to praise the students for that behavior. There we go. And I'll just summarize all of that huge text there. And just making sure that they're positive. Not saying things like, do not forget your things, do not yell, do not run, do not poke people, things like that, because when you put it in a negative light from the very beginning, it automatically puts you in punishment mode. And it's much better that the kids realize that this is a loving environment, a caring environment, a safe environment, and they don't have to walk on eggshells the entire time. So like for my expectations, and actually these are aligned with the school's expectations, I have be responsible, be respectful, and be safe. None of those are saying do not hurt others, do not be disrespectful, do not be irresponsible. Instead, it's in a more positive light. Now Mickey does look sad, but they're all in a more positive light so that the kids realize, okay, so there is a boundary, but, you know, it's not going to be like, raining fire down on them the
Right.
second that one little thing goes out of place.
It's like shifting the wording.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, they are children, so, you know, mistakes do happen, and children shouldn't think that, oh my gosh, I just called out, I'm gonna get it now, it's like we all make mistakes, so just making sure that it is that comfortable environment. The students aren't freaking out every 5 seconds. Because again, that's another way for kids to like be on the defensive and start causing misbehaviors from the very beginning, because they already feel like she wants to fight. We got this. We got her, guys, we can take her. We're more than her. So, I'm not gonna lie, I feel like some of my students do that sometimes, like, I'm bigger than she is, I can take her down. The third thing to establish the very first day with classroom management is to be consistent. Like we had already mentioned once before, the benefits students are ignored and misbehaviors aren't reinforced. Because if Morgan here I said Fancy, didn't I? Fancy, if she says something mean to you every time I turn my back and I just let it go, I'm basically saying that what she's doing is acceptable. That I'm okay with it because, well, I didn't see it. She looks so darling over there. She wouldn't have done anything. Don't make up lies, Morgan. You know. So it's you know what you did. Number 2, small interventions can be administered, preventing further and harsher interventions from being necessary. So the smaller that they are, you don't have they won't escalate into something much that you'd have to call in a cop, which hopefully would never get to that far, or call in an administrator, or call in a guidance counselor, or have to send them out.
Yeah.
You always want to make sure you can handle it in your classroom as small as possible, just saying, hey, we don't do that kind of thing, don't be mean to her. Or even just walking up to somebody the entire time and just standing there so that they can't do anything, because they're like, oh, she's staring at me.
Yeah.
She knows what I'm doing. Consistency also helps students know what to expect when something unexpected occurs. So they know if I yell out, Miss Easton's going to say, you shouldn't be doing that. And if I do it enough, I might get my recess taken from me. I might get lunch detention, I might have to do some homework. I can't eat with my friends. Things like that. So they know that there will be a consequence.
Yeah.
And they don't have to guess. Like, well, I've already done it 20 times. Maybe 21 is her limit.
Yeah.
And then the other kid's like, I've only done it 3 and she gave me a lunch detention. So consistency is good. And consistency shows no favoritism. If everybody gets, punished, which I would hate to say, but if everyone gets punished the same way, and everyone gets rewarded the same way, there's no favoritism. Because no one can say, well, she gets more than me, or she gets punished worse than me. Everybody just gets the same. And students will continue the misbehavior if they don't think they'll get a consequence every time they do it. They can see blind spots. And this is something that a lot of first-year teachers, myself included, it's very difficult. Because kids do see blind spots and they find them so easily. My first year, I was not, very authoritarian. I wasn't like, walk this way and do this and do that. And I didn't have really good classroom management skills. And so I wasn't very consistent, and they found them. The kids found the blind spots, and they exploited them. And that was one of the negatives of that year, with other things as well. But that was my own doing, though. I did it myself. Just because I wasn't experienced, and honestly, I hadn't had much classroom management training then. At least not many experience, especially. Just because classroom my student taught for was perfect. They were little angels. Which was wonderful, but it didn't do me any good in the long run. Another important detail to take into account with classroom management, which by the way, really quick, are any of you hot? Like, do you want me to prop a window open?
No, I'm not worried.
Okay, I was just making sure, because it's getting kind of hot in here. Maybe it's just me, because I'm standing up and doing presentation. But, another important detail to take into consideration with classroom management is, this is called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And you might have seen it before.
Just read about it 3 days ago.
Really?
So it's kind of funny timing.
Great! This is actually perfect and wonderful. I actually chose this one because I liked the illustrations, I liked the color, I liked how it looked. I didn't realize though until my presentation was already finalized that it said things like sexual intimacy
Ah.
and sex. This is for
Okay.
students, and those are inappropriate in a student setting. I know that you already know that, but just a heads up, I'm not giving you a green light, okay?
The illustrations were misleading.
Clearly this was for an adult class, which I wasn't aware when I just saw the illustrations and I was like, oh, that's engaging. And then I was like, oh my gosh. I was actually reading it to my mother and I was like, oh, I'm like, that shouldn't be there. Anyway, with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, as it says here, Abraham Maslow was a psychologist. He studied child development and he studied the things that influence growing individuals' lives. It also can impact our lives now, like even as adults. We can still go through these steps. Essentially, physiological, I always get this one wrong, I always say psychological, it's not the right thing. Physiological needs have to be met before anything else can be fulfilled in someone's life. So, in other words, if someone doesn't have, I don't understand breathing because then they would be dead. But if the person didn't have food, a shelter to sleep, water, if they didn't have, if they didn't have all of those things like clothing, the things that normal, like average students come in here with, they're not going to be able to feel safe, to feel loved, to feel esteemed, and to feel self-actualization. That's what Maslow was proposing. And I have seen it in some students. Now, I do feel like there are some exceptions. I have seen students who lack some physiological needs, but they still feel love, things like that. But he's just saying that we really can't feel 100% loved if we can't even get physiological things safe, because we might have to leave people, and move. We might have to, I don't know, drop off the face of the earth because we just can't, we have no home, something like that. So it's almost like they can't form lifelong bonds with people because they know that at any moment it could be taken away from them. The next would be safety, so just feeling secure with money, secure with a house, things like that. Next would be love, friendship, family, not the last one. And the next would be esteem, so having confidence, wanting to achieve, wanting to do their best. And then self-actualization is like morality, it's creativity, it's problem solving. So a lot of students that come into the classroom, they take these things with them. They take things like, oh, my father just lost his job. Oh, I didn't have breakfast this morning because my family can't provide for me. Oh, our house was robbed last weekend, and that makes me feel insecure. Oh, I don't know when I'm going to get my next meal because dad doesn't have a job. Or, with love, oh, my mother, neglects me, my family neglects me. I did have a student who, he was a twin with another boy, and the mother loved the other boy much more than the kid that I had in my class. And it was obvious he had terrible confidence, and he didn't feel like many people loved him. He didn't feel like he belonged. And then, when people feel loved, they can have these other things that come with it. But children come into our classrooms and they have these with them. And the thing is, if a kid, is wondering when am I going to have my next meal, it's very unlikely that they're going to be focused on their work, on a test that you have, on a worksheet that you have, because they're too busy thinking about their lives and things that have happened, like, oh, grandfather's sick, he's in the hospital, or, oh, my mom has a bad back and I feel terrible for her, what are we going to do? Now, I'm not saying that this is an excuse for misbehavior or for children not focusing. Just saying it's something we should take into consideration. Again, I've seen children who, they can't even afford sneakers, they're that poor, but they still come in and they're still positive and they're still excited and they still want to learn. This is not an end-all, be-all, model.
Right.
It's just that some students, though, do follow this pattern. That if they can't have these needs met, they can't fulfill these needs. So just a heads up in your classroom management, you might find kids like this. And so that's why as teachers, with our classroom management, we have to fulfill these needs.
That's what I was going to ask, what do you recommend?
Again,
not the weird ones. Oh, right.
Not the weird one. Sorry.
What do you think about helping in those situations? What's appropriate as a teacher?
Now, I will say, physiological needs, personally,
I don't know how much you can really do about that.
I will say, though, that there are children, though, if they can't afford breakfast, you can help the parents by, we have reduced or free lunch at the school. If parents are too poor, we can actually get them breakfast for free, lunch for free.
Okay.
So we do have those in place. So, just encouraging the parents to do that could help with food. We do have water here. We got a water fountain.
Okay, so just observing then you could then take what you've learned and realize the resources you can help provide.
Yes.
Is what you're saying.
And even like the school, we've had many situations where we've provided coats, we've taken collections with coats, jackets, shoes, anything, mittens to help students like in the wintertime if they can't afford them.
Okay.
So we can help with these needs for safety. That's why we have classroom management, so that they feel comfortable. Like they want to come here and they feel like when I'm at school, I'm safe. You know, I feel like I belong and I feel loved by the teacher and I feel loved by my classmates and this is where I want to be. So that's like where we can fill in. Now for achievement, that's something that they've got to accomplish on their own. Confidence is something they have to develop. We can help them by praising them when they do something right and
Not
like
sure.
being consistent and not
Yes.
being like, oh my gosh, you didn't capitalize your name, you know, idiot, and, you know, throwing the paper back in their face, you know, that's obviously not going to build confidence.
No.
But some of that is their own doing though. Like we can only do so much. You know, with that boy that I was talking about, the twin, Dave and I, my partner and I, we fueled in him all year, you're smart, you can do this. And he never listened to us because the influence at home was so great that we could not overcome that. But so that, in that regard, we tried to fill that. You know, we tried to help him fill that, but he unfortunately didn't want our help. And so that stopped him from going this far because he couldn't problem solve very well. He couldn't think creatively very well. You know, coloring wise, he still scribbled like, you know, a 2-year-old. I mean, it was just those things where he couldn't get the confidence to do better or to believe in himself. So I feel like to an extent we can fulfill like down here, to at least get the students to a point where they want to learn.
That makes
But they have to take it the extra step. We can't do that for them. And there's a limit as to what we can give.
Exactly.
I can't go up to a family and say, your son looks poor. I'm going to give you $500 because obviously I'm probably going to get beaten up or something like that. Like, how dare you? We don't need your charity. There you go. Throw it to the ground. So that's just something to consider with classroom management when, you know, your children are coming in and the places where we might be able to fill something in their life that they need.
That makes sense.
And since you guys do teach Sunday school and you go to church, obviously, so with this presentation, Dr. Royce, if you're looking at this part, this is not what I would suggest to many other public teachers, okay? Not, okay. But like for us, we can show God's love. And that can help students, feel that love and that safety because we can give something extra that other teachers probably cannot. Because we can give that love that they need. And so that will make them feel belong. Okay, done. Back to public teachers. Sorry. So it's also important to realize that there are ways we can ruin our established classroom management. So even though you were really effective and you put all of these things in place, there are still ways that it can come crashing down on you. So it's very important because again, I've done these too. Like where I've established something, I think even last year I did this with one area, where I established something and then I did something wrong and then all of a sudden it was like I saw it tumbling down. I thought, why? Why? Number 1, smiling at the wrong times.
I've experienced that, where it's like you know that it's something wrong, but you're trying really hard not to laugh.
Well, that's the thing.
And it
And
was
sometimes
really-
they say things that are really funny and you're like, I can't laugh, I can't laugh. Other
Because then you
times,
think, oh, I can make them laugh now if I keep doing this bad thing.
exactly, 'cause it's so funny. You know, like, oh, you just yelled at Fancy, that's so funny. But don't do that. Another thing, like my grandmother actually said that they used to have a saying when she was, when she was teaching, that it was, don't smile until after Thanksgiving. So
Oh,
after you've
okay.
already established it and for a couple of months you've gone through the classroom procedures and the kids know where your line